Lie down. Lie down. Come on, over here.
Welcome to Writer Talks, where you get to meet the winners of our short story contests here at Two Sisters Writing and Publishing. I'm Elizabeth Ann Atkins, and I'm so excited to introduce our guest this evening, Don Noel, coming to us from Connecticut, where he is just an absolute wonderful writer. And whenever I read his short stories, I'm just so engaged and engrossed. It's just awesome. So, welcome, Don, to Writer Talks.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thank you. I read your story, The Daddy Tree, in our most recent contest, and it was the winner, and it was so delightful. Please tell us about that story, and where do you get your ideas?
Well, you know, I've thought about this. One tends, at least at my age, one tends to sort of look back and remember things in one's life and little triggers. And it happened that when you folks said you wanted something that was magic realism,
Mm-hmm.
I've never written magic realism. I've never been interested in science fiction. I read it for a while, but anyway. And I remembered that when I was in junior high school, another pal and I used to go roaming through the woods, playing a game that we invented called arrow horseshoes, where we took a bow and arrow and tried to hit the tree. And if you hit the tree, it was a ringer. If you fell short, it was a leaner. Anyway. And I thought, when your thing came along, I thought, what would happen if the tree reacted? And so I said, let me play with that idea. So that's where that one got started.
Oh my gosh, it was so awesome. It's like the trees are alive, and they are. And the way you convey the beautiful mood and the tone and the playfulness, but the serious message about protecting nature and nature's responses to humans' behavior was just so beautiful. So thank you for gracing the world with your beautiful stories. So
Thank you.
You're welcome. Can you talk about your illustrious career as a journalist? How you worked at newspapers and then TV, and how writing is just basically in your DNA.
Writing is in my DNA, literally in my DNA. My paternal grandfather was at one point editor of the Butte Miner in Butte, Montana.
Wow.
My dad, the intervening generation, was a rather distinguished powder metallurgist who could hardly write his name. But when I was in fourth grade, I got into Cub Scouting and Boy Scouting. And in fifth grade, somebody said, why don't you write about we had one of these contests. And I wrote about that for the weekly paper. And then every other scout troop in town said, hey, come write about ours. And by the time I was in seventh grade, I was writing for the weekly West Orange Chronicle on a per inch basis. I was probably writing 50 to 100 inches a week.
Wow.
All sorts of things, and covering sports. I was a sports reporter. So that writing does in fact come pretty naturally, and I've done it most of my life. My wife, we met my late wife. We met in Cornell, and spent a year traveling around the world, literally on the cheapest possible transportation. And some of those experiences work into some of the short stories. And then we got back, and the first newspaper that wanted to hire me was the Hartford Times, the evening newspaper. And within 10, 11 years, I was editor-in-chief.
Wow.
And then, of course, evening newspapers collapsed. The fate of the evening newspapers was just foreshadowed. I won the Gannett Group of Newspapers, the Pulitzer Prize, in the middle of that for writing about the Black community in Hartford.
Oh, wow.
And then on the eve of the newspaper's collapse, I went to Channel 3, which had just then been bought by the Washington Post, which briefly owned television stations, and wanted to jack it up. And I became senior correspondent for the covering the Capitol and running Face the State, the Sunday morning talk show, and so forth. And then the last decade and a half, I went over to what had been my competitor, the Morning Current, and was op-ed political columnist there for a decade and a half.
Wow.
So when I finished, I thought, I've always wanted to write short stories, and so I Fairfield University has a very good MFA program and one of these non-resident where you only go for a couple of weeks twice a year. And so I took on that and earned my MFA in creative writing at age 80, which
my gosh,
set them a record. That was 9 years ago. So anyway.
9 years ago, you were 80. I am so delighted to talk with you. That's amazing. Like, what a long, beautiful, and diverse career in journalism. You've covered basically all the different, except radio. I didn't hear radio in there.
I never did radio.
But
of course, and in the course of that long life and being exposed to many things, there are so many things that have happened that have glanced into my life that when I sit there thinking, let's see, is there the germ of a short story there? And there's enough that I can create the setting, imagine the characters. And anyway, you're a writer, you know what it is. You sort of take interesting people and plant them in unlikely circumstances. Isn't that what we do?
Yes, it's so fun. So Don, tell me how you feel when you're writing a story. Like, does the whole world just go silent and you're just immersed in your imagination?
Yeah. That says it very well. I lose track of time, and occasionally I'll come to the point where I say, I'm not sure what they will do next, and I'm just going to lay it down and see when I wake up tomorrow morning whether I will have imagined overnight what else happened next.
Uh-huh. So the segue from journalism, which is the facts, and it follows a certain formula of what you have to have. There has to be a nut news peg, and there has to be, quotes, and it has to be accurate and attribution and all that. And then the segue into short story writing, which is fiction. What's that been like, being able to just make stuff up after having to follow those strict rules of journalism for so many years?
It's a form of relief, isn't it? I mean, There I was 40 years, if that's what it was, of always sticking to the facts, and then suddenly I'm freed, I'm liberated, and have fun.
I just love that. It's so, it's just fun. It's like running wild with your words and your imagination.
Yeah.
So what are you working on right now?
Well, I live behind me is it's what I see out my side window. But I'm living in a retirement community in Bloomfield, Connecticut, and there are people my age, younger. More, I'm one of the older residents, but 300 of us, and so one looks for people. I think the first story I did for you, Limerence, really picked up on something that one of my friends here said sort of in passing, and I picked up on that and developed it. Mm-hmm. And I've got another story that's just sort of beginning to take shape in my head that sort of imagines, what if a couple had really been toward the end of their marriage, it just wasn't working, but they've been together so long, and then they discovered a retirement community where there were so many things going on that she could do her things and he could do his things. And suddenly their retirement community, where they were thrust in upon themselves and it didn't work very well anymore, suddenly there's this whole world of the gym and the pool and the garden and the workshop and the book club, all things that exist here. I'm drawing on what's really here. And then what happens then if there's a pandemic and everybody in the residential community is restricted to their quarters, and their meals are brought to the shelf and they only see each other all day long? What happens then? I'm not sure where that one comes out, but I'm playing with that.
Wow, that's very real for right now.
But isn't that a fun thought to play with?
It is really fun. I mean, and it will have multi-generational appeal, because I've heard parents who are empty nesters, their kids go away to college, and while they're raising their kids, they're, he's working, she's working, the kids are doing their thing, and then suddenly they're alone together.
Yep.
What are they supposed to do? So
that's exactly the circumstance I'm imagining. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. But and then I'm sure you've heard the news reports about how the divorce rate during the pandemic has spiked because people have been together more. They can't go out. They're not at work. They're working at home, and they realize they're not happy anymore together. So
It really, I didn't know that the divorce rate is going up.
oh yeah, back in April, lawyers were saying that they were getting calls off the hook because people were calling to say, when can I file for divorce? And courts were closed. So it was
I
a
will have to go back.
mess.
Oh, that's a lovely little Philip. I'll have to go back and look that up and see if we can work that in.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it.
If I haven't decided where this ends, can I send it to you and you can tell me where it ought to end?
Sure. One thing that you did send, Don, that touched me so much, it's just forever in my heart, is the email that you sent about how we celebrated your writing, and in this world where there's such a youth focus and millennials are always in the headlines and such, to be recognized was so special. And it's just such an honor for us to celebrate you. And the stories are submitted blindly, so we didn't know who you were. We just read the story and awarded the winning title to you based on the quality of the work. But it was just so touching because it's never too late to do anything. I mean,
Well, that thank you very much. That's true. Age is not a restraint. Age is an advantage, and to me, this one of the things is age is an advantage because there's so many things that have gone on in my life that are potentially fodder for some kind of story.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then having that journalism provides such tremendous general knowledge base for you to draw from. And in the act of writing, you don't have to stop and look stuff up because you already know things. So you have
Well,
such a
I Google every now and then. Don't we all?
okay.
One of the comic strips today in the Hartford Courant showed a couple looking at their bookcase, a new bookcase, all neatly arranged, and they said it's wonderful background, but we'll never use it. And I thought, well, most of us, when we all know something, we get on the computer and look it up, don't we?
Right, exactly. Yes. I remember when I was a teenager, the Britannica encyclopedia people came to our house and said, someday this is all going to be on a disc this big. And we're like, yeah, right. Because we're looking at our big shelves of Britannica encyclopedias. And they were right. And now it's literally on our phone.
Those discs are out of date, aren't they? Nobody uses those anymore. They've gotten onto this thing.
Yep. Yes, absolutely. It's just wild. And you've gotten to see the entire, I mean, you came of age at a time when there were no cell phones or computers, and journalism was typeset back then, right?
That's right. Yes. Yep. As a
Yeah.
matter of fact, when I started, headlines were actually set by hand. You had a stick, and you took the mirror image of the letter that you wanted, cast it had a hollow where the type would go, and you put those together, and then you cast lead into it. It was really that primitive, isn't really maybe the right word, but compared to what we do today, remarkable.
Yeah, it's all digital. Wow. That's fascinating. Oh my gosh. So do you handwrite when you're writing, or do you use a computer? What's your method?
Oh, I can't write. Well, partly one of the factors of age is that my hand is arthritic, and I finally, it was so painful that it would take that forefinger and fuse it, and then I fused this wrist. So my handwriting is horrible. It's very awkward. But I've spent my whole life at a keyboard.
Right.
And even if my hands were in A1 shape, I think I probably would still consider writing on the keyboard to be the real thing. And maybe I will reach the point that I dictate to myself. Who knows?
Is that what you do now? How do you type if your hands aren't as functional as they were?
Badly, and I really thought about maybe I dictate.
Yeah.
That's it. That will be a learned skill. That will be different.
Uh-huh.
But it's not impossible.
No. It's called Dragon, I think. There's other technologies.
Yep. Dragon, actually
programs.
speaking. Yep.
Yeah, and it types for you.
Yep. We'll see whether that will work. I haven't quite reached that point yet. I have reading. I'm an Audible fan. I read 3 or 4 books a month, and I have them read to me while I get up in the morning and shower and do some exercise on the floor, all of which I'm about halfway through Barack Obama's book right now. And,
Oh, great. I haven't.
It's a very interesting book. Very. Did you read the New York Times review of it?
I did, yes.
A long review, which said he talks about the negatives and he talks about the difficulty of being Black, but he doesn't really get down to the gut feeling of it. And I thought, that's interesting. I'm halfway through it. I'm gonna have to listen more attentively to see if I agree. Some of the things I look back and I say, oh yeah, he sort of made light of that. There's a point he says, if I were concerned about being subject to racial prejudice, then I might do this and that and that. And the reviewer, whose name escapes me, sort of said, if? I mean, if, of course. Anyway, interesting. Fun.
It really, really is. Yeah, I haven't started reading it, but I'm so proud to have it. I just love him so much.
It is a good book. He really writes very well.
Yeah, and speaks very well too. So inspiring.
Yes.
Yeah. So, have you written any books?
I wrote it years ago. My wife and I bought a piece of land in Jamaica, West Indies, down on the South Shore, and built a house as a rental house. And we owned that and ran it for 3 decades. And I published a book called Near a Far Sea. We were on the coast and our fishermen went 30 miles offshore, 40 miles offshore, which they call Far Sea. And so we were near a far sea, and that's the name of the book. So I have a couple of novels that haven't been published. I haven't given up on them yet. I keep sending them out, and we'll see.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Yeah. I love it. So what was it like going back to school and essentially starting a whole new career to get your master's in fine arts?
It was interesting. First place, my fellow classmates were very accepting. I was different enough that they didn't treat me like the old man was. The devil is he doing here? And classes were small, and we were reading each other's work, and productively so. And I was a good enough critic, and they were good enough critics of mine So I have. Matter of fact, the other day on the evening of my birthday, I had a lovely call from a couple of my classmates and the dean of the program and my favorite faculty member, all who zoomed up to wish me a happy birthday. So they were good friends, and it was a good opening, and I learned a lot.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So have you ventured into any other genres like poetry or screenwriting?
No, poetry somehow I enjoy good poetry. I read not all the poetry strikes me as being good, but what's good I really like. But it's not my genre. Not my thing. Tell me about Two Sisters. How many manuscripts do you read in an average month?
In an average month, probably, well, all of our books are in varying stages of production. So the past several months, we've published a book a month, basically. So we published one on October 1st, and it's a bestseller. And then November, another book. And then one coming December 7th on Pearl Harbor Day. A woman wrote a book about her father from his voice, serving on the front line in France and Germany, liberating during World War II, liberating France and Germany from the Nazis. He was 18 years old and in the US Army. And she was in my book coaching program, and she wrote the book. It's beautiful. So it officially goes on sale on Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th. So about 3 or 4, really. But some are like being in their final edit stages, some are being in their proof stages, some are being, they're still being developed. So it varies, but I read a lot and I work long hours, but I love it. I love words. I get excited about verbs.
Are you and your sister the sole readers, or do you farm out some of the reading? If you do short story contests, for example.
Oh, we judge the short stories, but when we have a book, we have a proofreader who has an eagle eye for reading and finding stuff. You can read a manuscript of 50,000 words 10 times and still miss things. But Absolutely. Then when someone else reads it, they just stuff just pops out at them. So that's really important. Yep. big learning experience.
Yes, that's one of the skills of a journalist editor. Is if you're good at that, it's one of the reasons you rise is because your eye spots those things. Not always, even then. So you can hand it over to somebody else and they'll find something that you missed.
Yeah.
But you read it carefully.
Right. So do you have any pet peeves as a writer?
No, I'm mellow enough in my later years that I'm not sure I have any pet peeves.
Oh, okay.
Well, there's one, to be political, there's one pet peeve, but we're going to get rid of him pretty quickly. But really, it's a mellow life. I enjoy it. There are interesting people that I have contact with, even in this isolation, because of my Zooming with my neighbors back there. So it's a good life.
So because of COVID, you are not having contact with people? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we have had early on in the pandemic, we had one death and we've had 2 or 3 positives, but otherwise in a community of 300, all of whom are in the vulnerable age, we are clean.
Oh,
and
good.
It is because we are super careful about almost everything.
That's awesome. That's so great. Yeah. Wow, I'm so glad to hear that. So that makes it the perfect time to write.
Yes, yeah. As I say, I Zoom with committee. I meet with committees because I'm president of the resident association, but that still leaves me lots of time to sit down at the computer and not much else to do except read and write.
I love that. You're so lucky to the parents and the people out there who have jobs and kids and houses and all kinds of other stuff, and they just can't find the time to write.
Squeeze in the time, exactly.
Yeah, lucky you. That's awesome.
So there's a plus to these advancing years.
Yes, beautiful. So what are you reading besides Barack Obama's book? What else are you reading?
Oh dear. I make a point of reading the New Yorker in Audible books has short stories pretty regularly, and I make a point of reading them. I mean that's good stuff. I read in your material. I read my neighbors, the other people who read. I try to see what's going on in the short story world because that's the world I'm trying to be in, and there's more than one can possibly keep up with.
Oh yeah.
But it's fun and educate. It inspires, educates, a little bit of all of that. Yeah.
That's awesome. So what journalism besides the New Yorker do you read? What newspapers do you read?
Oh my! I read the Hearst newspapers, and Hearst used to be a second-rate name in Connecticut, and Hearst has bought up 4 of the biggest papers in Connecticut and turned them into essentially one publishing unit. So I read the Bridgeport Post, Bridgeport being 60 miles from where I live, but they're the best state newspaper. The Hartford Courant, for which I once lived, is down to. I'll tell you an interesting insight into the problem of journalism. When I became editor of the Hartford Times, as I told you, we were a failing evening newspaper. All evening newspapers were failing. And I inherited a newsroom of 110 photographers, reporters, editors, copy boys, 110 total. And I had to pare that down to 98, as I remember it, before I left. And the Hartford Courant, the morning newspaper, which was at one point the dominant newspaper in the state, their newsroom was down to 90. It's less than my newspaper was on the verge of going out. And it's a hard world. When how much time do we have? I'll tell you a little story. When I was on Channel 3, when I went from the Hartford Times to Channel 3, and the Washington Post, which, as I said, was trying to improve the product, they did a survey, and at 6 o'clock at night, 90% of all the television sets within the reach of our signal and Channel 3's signal and Channel 8 in New Haven, 90% of all those television sets were tuned to one of the 3 of us.
Wow.
Half of them were Channel 3, where we were the big dog. But and we were competitors, but we all agreed what was important in the news that day. We'd all been to the same Capitol news conferences or wherever they were with same accidents. And so for 1 hour, the people of Connecticut, 90% of all the people in Connecticut, essentially had the same insight into what had happened that day that mattered. And imagine that today, where everybody's on Facebook, they're all over the internet, they're picking up little stuff of misinformation, bad information, untested information, and the whole sense. I mean, one of the reasons that we have a real problem in our democracy, in my judgment, is that we no longer have a shared concept of what's important in our world or what's true in our world. And that is a huge difference and a huge problem. And it's a problem for journalists today that I never faced. As I said, in my time, Walter Cronkite said at the end of every broadcast, "That's the way it is." And we, in a different way, said to our readers, and they accepted it, that this was what we told them was the way it is. And that's no longer the case. You have half the population that believes that the election was rigged, which is totally absurd. But people believe that, or at least they for the moment, they talk themselves into it. And that's only one example of a lot of things, that people simply believe things that aren't true. Bad rumors pick up, and we are in a sorry state of not having a common sense, a community-wide, nationwide sense of what's important and what's happening and what's true in our world today. And that's an enormous handicap for anybody in journalism today. I'm glad that somebody else has that problem, not me.
Well, actually, on his recent interview on 60 Minutes, President Obama did address that, and he said that it's up to the local and national news to inform our citizenry about democracy and facts, not tainted by commentary that's skewed in one direction or another. And for those of us who are trained in traditional journalistic values of objectivity, of telling the story, the truth, not the left side, the right side, no, the middle. What is the truth?
Or if you're going to tell them your opinion, you label it as opinion, you tell them straight in.
Yes.
And my last 15 years, I was an op-ed columnist, and I was an opinion columnist. But I was also perfectly capable of turning around and saying, now, never mind what I think, here's what happened today.
Yes.
That's important.
Well, unfortunately, those lines have been so blurred. And then when commentary is given and people accept it as fact, and that's where the problem is. And secondly, I don't know if you saw the documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma.
I read about it, but didn't see it.
It's about exactly what you just said. You just nailed it in terms of how social media and all these biased outlets where people express their opinions and things that are not rooted in fact sway public opinion and result in this divisiveness that we have. And it's only getting worse because we have this sort of tunnel vision. I can look at, listen, what reinforces my beliefs. And I don't have to hear anybody else's opinion. I could just keep staying immersed in this. And then everybody's immersed over here in this, and that's where the clash occurs.
Yep, and you don't have what we had in my heyday, where everybody really agreed on what the news was for the day and presented it maybe a little differently, competitively, but we all agreed on what the facts were that we were reporting. And our community agreed that those were the facts that mattered that day. Huge difference.
Yes, that integrity. I wish that could come back. And that whole term, fake news, I can't even wrap my mind around what that is. Fake news. No, there's truth. There's facts.
Yep.
Anyway.
and a lot of people out there trying to tell it the way it really is, trying to tell it straight. I mean, there's a lot of good journalism that goes on in our community, and I'm glad for it.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. Well, Don, I'm so delighted to talk with you. I just admire you so much, and your writing is absolutely delightful. So anybody out there watching, Don Noel, his writing is in our anthology, one of our international anthologies, and he'll be in our, he's going to be in two of them ultimately. He's already published in one and will be published in the next one, which they're both in progress right now.
And online in the meantime.
Yes, at twosisterswriting.com, you can go to the winners and search Don Noel and read his stories, and I guarantee you will be delighted.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad to have been invited and had the chance to chat with you and get to know you a little better.
It's wonderful talking with you. I love talking about journalism and writing, and I'm just such a fan of your writing. So, Don, thank you for gracing us with your presence. I wish you wellness and happy writing, and I hope to see some more of your stories.
Thank you so much. We'll send some your way.
Okay, so good. Much. And happy birthday.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll see you soon. And for all of you watching, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Writer Talks, where you get to meet the amazing writers who won the short story contests here at Two Sisters Writing and Publishing and get featured in our international anthologies. I'm Elizabeth Ann Atkins, and if you're finding value here, please like, share, subscribe, and comment, and we will see you next time in the next episode of Writer Talks. See you next time, and happy writing!